It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. The neighborhood. Hello, everyone. It is a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It truly is. I mean, what better neighborhood could you ever want to be in but this one? How are you doing? Little different today. I actually lost one of my monitors, so wasn't the monitor's fault. It was actually my computer. So I'm in the midst of uh, getting a new computer. So, and that is a wonderful experience. I just invoke favor on that experience because I'm going to have to do it. And so instead of saying what a pain, I am saying what a gain. So there you go. How is everybody? So good to see you. Thank you, everyone. Hello, Lois. Good to see you, Cajun Queen Tarot. Let's see. Aries Colt Rogers. Hello. Hey, Brian, Milky Way Messenger. Well, hello, Sue. Blue. Okay, I'm trying to see so many things going very quickly because normally I'm reading this on a very big monitor. Now I'm reading it in a very small one. So welcome everyone that's in here. If I didn't mention your name, it's just that, well, you do with what you have to do, right? So thank you, all the moderators that's in here. David, good to see you, and Lucky Stone and Claire. Let's see, Franny, how are you, my dear? Good to see you. Anne and boy EO, good to see you. Cindy, Mr. Floyd, peace. Now that I'm getting over to the other side. Blue Bottle Farms, there we go. That young woman has a great voice. You got to check her out on her YouTube channel. Hello, Deborah with Gravity Storm. Boy, so many people in here. So good to see y'all. So anyway, I been working the juicer and the blender. A fresh pineapple with mango and something else is in there. But yeah, gotta love the summertime. That's all what I got to say. So let me just invoke favor on everyone. I think it's one of the fun parts of this whole meeting we get to come to every day and share in the community. So just invoking favor on you. And I always like the supernatural favor. And you break that word down, all it simply is saying is that it's natural, just super. What's wrong with that? But that, like many other words, has been hijacked, because supernatural, that means the paranormal. No, it just means that it's natural and we're just supersizing it, and that's what we're speaking over our lives each day. And, no matter how your point of view is, you have what you say. That has been taught. I knew that so well in my days as a Christian. I mean, I was one of those people, folks, and I know I'm getting a little bit off the invocation, but hear me out. I mean, I was so sensitively aware of the power of my words that, yeah. The only problem when you get into extremes, it always has the boomerang. So just invoking supernatural favor upon you and full restoration in your lives, whatever that may be: health, love, emotional healing, soul healing. I contend probably what is not talked about and should be, maybe we will here, is spirit healing. I think there's a lot of wounded spirits. I really do. I think sometimes we can inflict or inflicted so traumatically upon our inner beings that so often our spirits go unhealed. Just my thoughts. So nothing missing, nothing broken be found in your life. Yeah, I mean, seriously, this reality that we live in, it's amazing. It is. And I don't know, a question for the group, and I'd love to see their response in the comments later as well. It's amazing as well is that, you know, the, the I don't know, what do you want to call these lessons? I kind of look at it like we're just in a virtual amphitheater. I just happen to have the microphone. And the other channels that people hear from Brian at Milky Way and Lois over at Cajun Queen and Kaz over and her, I mean, so many other channels. You're just in the virtual amphitheater. You have your time at the mic. So when we look at this reality, we always measure it by, I guess, progress, evolving. Let's see. Yeah, y'all ought to read Franny's comments. The girl is smart. I mean, she really is. Yeah, I would agree with you. So are we as evolved as we think we are? If we were to take away technology, what would we be left with? Would we be left with the same paradigm of, Judeo-Christianity versus the rest of the world and its belief systems? I mean, that's what it's been for the last 2,000 years. I don't know if progress. So if we take technology away, would we be as advanced as we are? Or are we as advanced? It's almost like, when you supplement something, it means typically you're taking away something from somewhere else to supplement, artificially up something, hold something up. So think about it. Here we are. Have we advanced? Is technology pushing us beyond our ability to adapt? I don't know. The question I was asking, just talking with Source, hey, listen, I was one that used to pray fervently. I know what it is to pray. I could get myself into a trance in prayer. And, I contend that we're all telepathic. We're all communicating to something. I mean, you pick your choice of words, but the evidence would say that we all do it. And I was thinking about this. All right. I contend, ladies and gentlemen, that today, because of the rapid availability of information, whether it be true, whether it not be, it's just the access to it. I mean, if you look at our species and you look in how we come up the last, we have a written record of about 10,000. I contend if you take the La Croix cave drawings in France, let's add another 40,000 to that. All right. In one way or another, we have communicated. So when I look at this, I ask myself, all right, information was passed down by word of mouth. That's how we did it. Or maybe it was sigils. I contend it was most likely sigils. The other bucket I think that we could include in this discussion would be maybe our ancestors were much more telepathically disciplined. I don't know. However, when we got the larynx and we began to vocalize our thoughts is where we got in trouble. So here's a question. Is magic changing and evolving because of technology? I mean, you think about it. If you were born 200 years ago here in America, you were most likely working as a farmer. a rancher, or you would have a trade, blacksmith, a weaver. I mean, name it. Your availability to information would be greatly limited by your location and your status. Now, if you were wealthy in the upper status of society, there were universities. The thing about it was 200 years ago, most universities were Bible colleges here in the United States. It was very difficult to find an academic school set apart from the morals of the time. And my whole point to this is, what you would have learned about magic would have been contrasted by the fear of the power structure that was in place and had been in place, again, for nearly 2,000 years. So I can't say that, magic was really changed. I mean, it was really coming out of the Renaissance. And the Renaissance era got it from the Dark Ages, many different cultures blending in, much of that as the result of the post-Roman Empire. There was a vacuum. And so, Europe, other parts of the world were engaged in war. If it wasn't for the Phoenicians, I dare say we would probably still be regressed by another 1,000 years. I mean, the Phoenicians, say what you will about them, they were the ones who brought forth all of the knowledge, whether it was the Gnostic, the occultic, or the religious dogma of many different religions. That's what they traded in. And from there, that knowledge came from specific regions. Much of what we know in Western occult, Gnosticism, and even religious dogma still originates back from the Egyptians, I dare say the Chaldeans, and going back further, pre-Mesopotamia, you get into the legends, the myths, or the truths of Sumer. Now, Sumer is a mystery because it seems to be almost a plug and play culture, society. Comes ready with laws, structure, culture, agriculture, mathematics, sciences, magic. And from there, we get the stories of the gods. The gods used magic. There were many different gods. We talked about yesterday, is intelligence equal to worship? Now, some people say, well, worship is a form of devotion. Yeah, I love my wife, folks. I don't worship her. It would be weird. Now, I am madly in love with her. But if you want to translate that into your own thinking as worship, okay, I see it a little bit differently, but I digress in what the point is today. Magic. So when we look at all this way back, the thing that is the common denominator throughout all this, throughout all of this, all of the gods, all of the pantheons of deities, magic, whatever it is, comes down to this one simple question. What happens after we die? Now, we're going to die, so we want to say that we are spirit. Well, that presents some challenges because if we are spirit, then what we're implying is that there's going to be this afterlife. Now, the Egyptians have it in there, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You can read the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Two different approaches to this, but magic, well involved, particularly, I would say, with the Egyptians. And today we're going to be getting into the subject matter of familiar spirits. So I want to start off with a website I really recommend. This is a cool website. It's called The Truth and Death About truthandaboutdeath.com. I love what this guy wrote. And let's just read this because it fits perfectly in setting up the foundation of what we're going to be talking about. It says, any study of the nature of death begs an important foundational question. Why must things die in the first place? That's a question I think all of us ask. Why do we have to die? Now, in my upbringing, my indoctrination was that, well, that's the natural course because there's going to be a life after this that's going to be eternal. Now, you stop and think about this today. Oh, do I have a rebuttal for that one? But let's continue. Indeed, death is a grand mystery. Throughout time, every major religion, philosophy, and spiritual train of thought has sought to explain this mystery. It is a subject that touches the life of every man and woman, uniting the entire human race under a cloud of inevitable mortality. The rich, the poor alike meet the same end. The black, the white, both go to the grave. The powerful and the humble all leave this planet eventually. Interestingly, scientific research into single-celled organisms reveals that the nature of life on a cellular level does not automatically include a self-destruct mechanism for death. In other words, it appears that death is an unnatural part of life. Yet, despite this, everything on earth eventually dies. Many lines of religious thought simply accept the inevitability of death and instead try to offer better alternatives that await the faithful in the afterlife. These ideas bring comfort to many people who have lost loved ones or are facing death themselves. But they leave others wondering, why must death exist? Wouldn't an all-powerful God eradicate death? Shouldn't all life inherently live forever? So the question of the nature of death also brings profound implications about the nature of a God. Maybe some reason God is not as powerful as he says, since the problem of death remains. Maybe God's numb to our sensibilities after death. If we are promised happiness and paradise despite the horrors unfolding in our loved ones who are still alive, maybe if living a bad life truly results in eternal torment afterwards, God is not really as loving as so many people claim. Maybe there are actually many pathways to God, or many such gods, and the mystery of death will be solved differently for each person, depending on their philosophies in life. Maybe there is no such thing as death. Maybe, instead, a continual rebirth through reincarnation. Maybe, according to the train of thought that has grown in popularity since the 19th century, life is nothing more than a biochemical accident. And death brings with it a never-ending state of nothingness. I did a video on this. The most common conclusion drawn from this line of thinking is that there is no God at all. Now, I know, save the emails, folks. We're merely talking here about alternatives. Not saying that this is, in fact, what is or what is not. No one knows. I mean, we've all taken spiritual, well, many of us have. Many of us believe we have spirit guides. But most of all of us believe that there is an afterlife where I'm sure I did a video and it got flagged because it was too intense. And it was called The Alternative, the nothingness. And, that's a horror that most people can't handle. Yeah. But if you look at this from a quantum perspective, absolute zero, 0-point energy, X, Y, Z axis, 0.0, means no motion, no vibration. That's why I really enjoy the Hermetica. This is a book that I read quite often because it tells me that at least that, hey, there is something here. So I vibrate. You know what I mean, man? I vibrate. Listen to the music. There you go. So, all right, taking that into it, we're going to continue to pick up where we left off last Friday. And we've talked about this Thugery, the operation of effect of a supernatural divine agency in human affairs, a system of white magic produced by the early Neoplantists. White magic, black magic. Pick your poison. I contend it seems like all magic is based on the individual. I mean, if you use magic, and most of us do, to acquire what we need to sustain life, is that wrong? No. I did it in the religious doctrine that I was brought in for decades. I prayed earnestly. Not sure what I was praying to, but I was praying. Prayed that, this need be met. Prayed that need would be met. Prayed that this would be healed. Prayed that, come on. Prayed that I won't miss my plane. Prayed when I got on the plane that the plane would stay up in the air. Yeah, I mean, so in a sense, you look at this, every person, regardless of your doctrine, your dogma, your philosophy, your ideology, whatever that may be, you're working your own magic. All religions, all non-religions, all philosophies. So what we have here is literally, it just means God's work. It represents the high art of belonging to the philosopher in the task to gain all knowledge. So we know that things are spiritual and material. This is actually a magical technique performed by individuals who were reported to have godlike powers. People who call down rain. People who could bring earthquakes. I mean, it's replete through our history. All right. So today we're going to be talking about familiar spirits. Now, I learned about familiar spirits. I guess my first introduction would have been Edgar Cayce. Um, I was a part of Edgar Cayce's following back in the mid 70s. Prior to that, I had a great introduction to Native American shamanism, Vision Quest, um, anyway. So you look at this picture here, every one of those skulls was a person. Now, I brought this up as the title in this, Once They Lived. So if you just take this picture, how many different spirits do we have? Excuse me. I don't know. Say 100? Maybe a little bit more? I don't know. Familiar spirits. Do you know yours? One thing that we can say, excuse me, doorways and portals. As I continue to study this, I contend that they're opened everywhere. I mean, I had one opened up, didn't seal it properly. Now you say that, and people go, what is he talking about? Didn't seal it. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're not in Kansas anymore. Get this. There is this now resurgence taking place. Boy, if you want to say that on this side on the bench is Team A, on the other side of the field is Team B, well, these cats are really getting wound up. Demonic networks, confederacies. We are praying this prayer because we are not ignorant of the devices of the devil. Satan, is Satan the devil or is the devil Satan, cannot operate without demonic networks. And he relies heavily on networks, whether it be networks of witchcraft, the occult, marine power, spirit spouses, and voodoo, hoodoo, hexes, and familiar spirits. There is one way you can look at this, folks. If things continue to progress as they go, wow, man, this could become almost like a political thing. We're talking about, witch burnings. All right. Familiar spirits. What are we talking about? Well, in one sense of, I guess, more of where this doctrine comes from, this belief is that in one case, demons or fairies both have been called by this name. In religious texts, there are many stories of humans being possessed of a familiar spirit. We're going to get into this. Most religions have references to such entities. As my copy of the Quran, the Vedic, the Bible, other different belief systems out there, all come with the package of familiar spirits. So that alone would imply that it's something very common with human beings. Seems like no matter where we are, at what time we're placed on the planet, this seems to be a common thread. In today's modern culture, there is much confusion as to what exactly is a familiar spirit. Fact is, this term is not used much, whereas demons and fairies and angels are more familiar terms. And this is what most Western cultures, all of us, for the most part, now we have people in our community who live in India, we have people who live in China, and others that, their culture has different points of view on this. But again, whether it be a demigod, demon, upper, lower, fairies, or angels, all can be said to be familiar spirits. Also, human beings are, in fact, familiar spirits, those who have passed on. When we look at this as well, in many of the practices of paganism, Wicca, other, I just say occult beliefs, familiar spirits are both human beings, animals, and in the spirit realm, you have no idea. I think that's what many of us are going to be shocked by. They're not all bipedals. So there is a heavy focus and concentration to indoctrinate young people very early about being afraid of familiar spirits, the boogeyman, the thing that lives underneath your bed or in your closet. So I just wanted to pull out some of this. This is a lot of from the Torah, the Old Testament, and other books. So it says, God forbid, bade Israel to seek information from familiar spirits. You catching this? This is in Leviticus 9:19-31. In Deuteronomy 18:11, it says necromancy was so contrary to God's commands that its practitioners were under the death penalty. Deuteronomy 13. Sorcerers or necromancers who call upon the dead are possessed of and by a familiar spirit. We're talking about demonic possession here. Yeah. In Deuteronomy 8:11, 2 Kings 21:6, Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 33, and Leviticus 19. All of these are references to the absolute forbidding of this practice. Now, mind you, many of the practices that were demanded by this deity were no different. I mean, all right, get this. So you are forbidden to seek information from familiar spirits, but you're okay to do it by a prophet. A prophet will throw the bones, throw the die. I mean, today you have people who call upon archangels in Christianity. Are these not familiar spirits? The story that many of us probably know who come out of the Christian belief is the witch of Endor. King Saul, I've talked about this. Samuel had died. There was no prophet. The king had no way of invoking the magic of Samuel to peer into the future and determine whether the king would be victorious or not. And so Saul sent out his servants, and they said, well, we don't really need to know. We know that there is a witch. It says, behold, there is a woman that has a familiar spirit at Endor. And Saul disguised himself and put on other clothes, and he went, and 2 men went with him. That would be his Praetorian guard, so to speak. And they came to the woman by night And Saul entered in and said, I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit. So if we take this into the timetable, folks, we're looking at somewhere right around, I don't know, probably 1000 BC, 900 BC. Goes back a ways, folks. Think about that. And bring him up to me, that I shall name, that whom I shall name unto thee. All right. And the woman said unto him, behold, I know that you are the king, that you are Saul, and how he has cut off those who have familiar spirits and wizards out of the land. Wherefore then layest thou a snare for my life to cause me to die? Now, the story went on that she did, in fact, conjure up Samuel. And as I have told you, Samuel apparently was the real Samuel. So, obviously the reference there is that there is this afterlife. Now, I'm not Jewish. I'm not Hebrew. I contend the Ten Commandments have no application or enforcement other than if you are Jewish. They weren't given to the world. Stop and think about that one. All right, so we go on. In Isaiah, it says, behold, I and the children whom the Lord hath given me are for signs and for wonders. Signs and wonders. Now, if you're using this in a religious context, wow, this is far out, man. But if you use this in occultism, well, by God, you're going to hell. It's crazy. All right, it goes on. From the Lord of hosts, which dwells in Mount Zion, and they shall say unto him, seek unto them that I have familiar spirits, and unto the wizards that peep, and that the mutter. Should not a people seek unto their God? For the living to the dead, to how the law and the testimony, if they speak not according to the words. Take this for what it is not saying to you through the filter. Take it for what the knowledge that they're trying to hide here. Very obviously that there were wizards, those that were able to cast invocations, invoking spirits, dare I say, demigods, deities, principalities, powers. It kind of goes back to like the Middle Earth legend, when this was very prominent. Now, you also look at this as well, and it goes all the way back, and it says, and the spirit of Egypt. Well, we've talked about this. Moshe, literally it's a title. The magus, the magician. All right. So as we talked about with the witch of Endor, the misconception of witches and conjuring dates back nearly 3,500 years ago. And the most well-known in the West is the Old Testament story of King Saul. We just read that. In Hebrew, a witch is known as a Baal-Ov, mistress of a divining or familiar spirit. An Ob is pronounced Ov. And an Ov is a spirit of the dead or minor underworld deity that speaks from the earth in whispering voices. They are also objects of worship whose spirit can enter into a human and reside within them. This one is who possesses a familiar spirit is also one who is possessed by it. Now, I have said here that this thing, familiar spirits, in certain religious dogmas are called the Holy Spirit. The same process of being possessed, inviting the Holy Spirit in. That is a self-invocation of spirit possession. Now, they say that there's evidence of how that can be, proven. Think about this. So, where did the familiar spirits come from? Now, according to the body of spells and magic from the Greco-Egyptian era, called the Greek Magical Papyra, or the PGM, you can actually get this, folks. The specialized familiar spirit was called are you ready for this? Parhydro, or a magical servant, from the Greek para and hydros, which means near or close to one's side. How many of you depend on your spirit guides? You should. I did it for decades, only my substitution was a different personification. The process was the same. By the positioning of the text, the first are spells that help the witch, the sorcerer, the magician, is to obtain a magical servant. In other words, what it is saying, this is the most important step in your own perfection of your own magic. Now, it's a different point of view. It's all it is. I mean, I practice this as a Christian. Same process. Now, it's evidence with the volumes of collected magical instructions, the most important first step for a person is to acquire one. So if you don't recognize yours, or yours has just gotten PO'd at you, there is steps that you can actually invoke one. Now, I want to talk about this one because you can't deal with this subject unless you deal with this thing called the Jezebel spirit. It's one that you hear over and over again. And I kind of like to just blow this out because actually all this is branding a attributes of human nature into a class. So this is what they say. A Jezebel spirit seeks out other individuals they feel are weaker to control, influence, and dominate. I've had bosses like that. Has an unnatural sense of self-importance. Are you serious? Requires excessive admiration and attention. Okay. Shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. Lacks self-control, unable to control emotional outbursts, unconcerned with affecting others. Exploitive, abusive, takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own goals. Manipulative, lies, totally void of empathy, will falsely mimic empathy to seduce and control their victims. Jealous and envious of others, yet delusional in believing others are jealous and envious of them. Defensive and combative whenever confronted about anything. Fantasizes about themselves having unlimited admiration, beauty, power, success, brilliance, or perfected worship and love. Believes that he or she is superior and unique and can only be understood by other superior people. Has a sense of entitlement, demands automatic compliance with his or her expectations, unreasonable expectations of others, critical when disappointed. Folks, that ain't no Jezebel spirit. That's most people I know. All of us have been this. But you see how it's planted into the old cerebral cortex. So let's talk about, again, our next reference to a familiar spirit in what we would call the postmodern time. This was Paul's encounter with, again, if you read the text, it would appear that what was rampant or virtually everywhere, commonplace may be the best word, in every city, every village, every community, all had their practitioners of the magical arts. All of them did. Apparently, that was the big thing that this new religion was fighting the most of. Truth be told, it was much like Hellenism. It merely adapted. So again, we're getting a lot of this from Fratter's book here. This is a fantastic book. I got to tell you, Spirit Conjuring for Witches. It's a fascinating read. So when we look now outside a Judeo-Christian Western belief system, what we have found, again, in every culture, the seers, the practitioners, the healers, every king had a seer on staff, every queen. We have them in the United States government. Most governments do. There's a reason for it, because it works. And we have seen this in prodigies. The very young come into this realm with a very unique ability to be, I guess, a conduit. They can both see and commune with the spirit realm. It has been everywhere. If you're a practicer of the tarot cards, Lois, Cajun Queen Tarot, all of you that, there's just so many. I can think of Ruth with Kindred Spirit. So many others. It's because of this fact of being what I contend is an empath, sensitive. But what we've had here is rituals that have been brought up through the imaginations of individuals that had virtually no understanding of what they were talking about. So let's talk about spiritual intermediaries. Now, the Greeks believed that the spiritual intermediaries between the gods and mankind were neutral, solely the attribute of whatever deity under whose directive they acted. Now, whether it was the Greek pantheon prior to that, or even Roman, Paul taught about this. There's a what appears to be an organized structure in this spiritual realm. Now, for the conjurer, for those of you like myself who are conjurers, listen, I've been doing it for decades, never realized it. I'm a master at it. They gave me my journeyman card, and then they said, oh, here, we need to give you one other card. You know, it's a master journeyman. So for the conjurer, it is vital to have this connection with the familiar spirit and the spirit realm. You know, it's like we've been told that you have to go through this wall, this filter, in order to approach or to talk about. And it's really not that way. Now, the Greeks called them daemons, which later the Christian theologians interpreted as demons. So when you hear the term demon, it's not evil. It's been assigned that in the church dominance of consciousness. But you got to get it out of your head. I mean, you go in with this and you think that demons are all evil. Well, you're going to be overwhelmed. You see, the church went to great lengths to so implant this fear, because the reason why they did it, it was a direct assault and challenge to their power. And as the old expression said with the devil, he says, you know, why isn't there more hells? The term we've heard, heavens, different layers of heavens, multiple heavens. Why? Well, because the devil said there can only be one hell. Yeah, you see? But yet, in many of the interpretive paintings coming out of the Renaissance period, it was, I believe, an awakening of a connection that has been for the centuries being built, constructed. More knowledge of this understanding, this knowledge, this magic, the more you become aware of it. Now, the question is, do you have a familiar spirit? All right, let's follow this. The entities sometimes mistaken for fairies or demons, even angels, but known as familiar spirits, are actual living spirit beings and are creatures from the spirit realm, and has the ability to reside and affect things in both the material and the spiritual world. As a being, it is a very specialized entity, which is known by many cultures as spirit guides, guardian angels, or other such spirits that have been helpers and familiars. However, this is but the beginning to understanding of these beings. They do exist, folks. There is solid evidence that there is those spirits that follow us. We found this out many times through cameras and throughout history. We see that this is representative in many beliefs today, Wicca particularly, of actually, let me just get this, be very straight about this. This is even in other cultures. Native American Indians have always looked at animals as potential spirit guides. Now, the supernatural assistant, the operator, regularly identifies himself with the divinity. He tries to take possession of the God's true name with the purpose of approaching a superior power that will guarantee his ability to act in an inner worldly context by means of knowledge originating from a communal with the divinity. In other words, a communal relationship. The goal is for the practitioner to be transformed through the execution of specific rites so that he or she will be able to participate in the sphere of the gods. Did you get that? Sorry, folks. Someone was buzzing. I know what it was. All right. So, this is important. Every leader, no matter whether it's a leader of one or a leader of millions, understands this. There is greater power, and it's like any actor who's going to play the role, the lead role of a movie or a play. You have to become the person, the personification. That's why acting is so hard. That's why most people don't do it. The truly great actors literally become possessed by the character they're emulating. Now, this is achieved by procuring what we talked about before, the pehedros, or the divine assistant, or through a process called synthesis, where the magician presents himself to the deity in a form of binding personal service. Told you this gets deep. So let's talk about the spirit guides manifesting in our dreams. I will share a story with you about the ravens. Anyway, the antelope spirit guide. It says that when the antelope springs in as your spirit animal, it's time for watchfulness. Antelope as a totem animal belongs to those of the pure heart. And what I did is I came through here. Now, this is the raven. The raven is about rebirth, recovery, renewal, recycling, reflection, and healing. He signifies moving through transition smoothly by casting light into the darkness. Now, for myself, I can tell you, I've had incidences here where I live where these magnificent birds come up, and if you don't think that they don't communicate, guess what? They do. They have, oh man, I'm telling you, there is a spirit in these animals. The fox, his eyes have seen the other worlds. He travels there night after night. He knows the intricate path. He leads those that need to be led. His spirit is strong and canny. He is the fox spirit. The goat spirit. It's a time to take a more sure-footed approach to things. I love the one about the hawk. This is from the Handbook, Animals of the Spirit Guide by Stephen Farmer. If the hawk shows up, it means you're caught up in too many details. So step back so you can get a greater perspective on the situation. Stay alert and focused on the tasks before you, eliminating as many distractions as possible. Spend time observing and studying the situation, and when it's time for action, make it quick and decisive. Pay close attention to your surroundings as you're about to receive an important message. Be aware of any personal or psychic attacks and be prepared to defend yourself. Stop trying to change others or the situation and work instead on accepting things as they are. Do you see what I'm trying to get to? Now, many of you know this. The owl. Boy, him and I years ago had many, many encounters. Couldn't figure out when I would run very early in the morning. I had an owl that constantly followed me. Anyway, it stands for wisdom, intuition, transformation. The spirit of the owl guides you to see beyond the illusion and deceit. The owl offers the inspiration and guidance necessary to deeply explore the unknown and the magic of life. The wolf, you hear this very often. This is a time to mark your position. So let's talk about the pehedros. The pehedros is believed to be the individual supernatural assistant separate from the magician. It can also appear in many different forms depending on the context of the magic spell. It can also assume the shape of a human and in some cases is seen as a holy guardian angel. It can also be identified directly with a personalized deity or a specific magical object, a talisman. The pehedros is considered nothing more than a physical manifestation of that powerful internal relationship, allowing the identification of a specific deity to the degree of producing of a kind of Godhead identity. And you can begin to see how this Godhead identity becomes established through the lore of so many different beliefs. All of them are here. And in essence, folks, we're all spirits. So now we're going to get in later on in necromancy. We're going to really begin to get more of, excuse me one second as he gets out of there, into breaking that out. If there was a reason for they put people to death for such knowledge, the question has to be asked, why? For what reason? What purpose? We're going to find out. So I hope this has helped. I kind of, for me, it just kind of clears everything out, kind of makes everything much more manageable, bite size. And when you have knowledge and you understand how the misconceptions that are also they're so interwoven in so much of our culture today that many times you just literally have to break the magics, the spells, and just bring out the clarity. Well, folks, thank you. Hours come and gone. I had a great time. I hope that this has been at least informative. And for those of you who can accept it, that's cool. Those of you who can't, oh, that's cool too. Knowledge is knowledge. It comes in many different flavors and in many different sizes. And you just pick out your own, whichever works best for you. All right, folks, I will be here tomorrow with Trina, I believe. And we had some other material. I'll get into it on Thursday. A lot of what we were dealing with and talking to the planets. Found some interesting knowledge dating way back. All right, folks, thank you. Appreciate it. Be good to yourselves. Have favor today. Enjoy the day wherever you are. Remember, it is your day. That's the best day. All right, folks, we'll see you tomorrow. All right, bye-bye.